She called me a pauper. She disrespected my past. And now she's standing on my doorstep, asking for $20,000, and she thinks that this worthless guy can still be used. I met Alice back in college during one of those hazy early fall afternoons when campus still felt like a new world, wide open and brimming with possibility. She was the kind of person who stood out without trying, graceful, well-dressed in that effortless way, always seeming to know exactly where she was going and why. It didn't take long for me to learn that she came from wealth, the kind of wealth that meant cozy vacation homes tucked into quiet coastal towns, ski trips every winter break, and never having to worry about whether rent or tuition would get paid on time. Her life seemed full of softness and abundance. Clean white sheets that smelled like lavender, kitchen drawers that were always organized, family dinners with matching plates and wine poured into real glasses. I, on the other hand, had come from a world that looked nothing like hers. I grew up in deep, aching poverty, the kind that makes you learn too early how to stretch a dollar and which foods keep you full the longest. My parents worked constantly, cleaning, hauling, fixing, just to keep a roof over our heads, and even then there were nights when we had to get creative with dinner, scraping together whatever was left in the fridge. There were winters when the heating bill was too much, and we'd huddle under layered blankets, pretending it was just another game. I remember going to school with shoes a size too small, hiding holes in my backpack with duct tape, and smiling through it all because you learn not to show need when you grow up around it. So when Alice and I met, it felt like two worlds colliding, one polished and untouched, the other weathered and bruised. But somehow, in the strange alchemy of youth and circumstance, we found each other. And for a while that was enough. I swore to myself from a young age that I would break out of the circle I'd been born into, that I wouldn't let my future be dictated by the same scarcity and exhaustion that had shaped every year of my childhood. There wasn't any grand plan, just this burning determination that lived in my chest like a second heartbeat, pushing me forward when everything around me told me to accept less. I studied relentlessly, poring over borrowed textbooks under dim lights, staying up long after everyone else had gone to sleep just to catch up on what others took for granted. I took whatever jobs I could, dishwashing, tutoring, janitorial shifts, anything that paid, anything that helped chip away at the distance between where I was and where I wanted to be. Every achievement, no matter how small, felt like a battle won. And eventually that relentless climb began to pay off. I earned a scholarship, one of those long-shot dreams I never let myself speak out loud until it was real, and it gave me the chance to go to college, to walk onto a campus that felt like another planet compared to the one I came from. It was there, in that strange new world of dorm rooms and lecture halls and people who had never once worried about whether they'd have enough gas money to get home, that I met Alice. She entered my life like sunlight through a cracked window, soft and golden and unexpected. And in that moment, even though I was still carrying every ounce of the struggle that got me there, I felt something shift. I had made it. And she was the first person who made me feel like maybe I didn't have to carry it all alone. For the longest time, I genuinely believed that Alice was too good for me, not just because of where she came from or the way she moved through the world with such ease, but because being around her felt like standing in a place I wasn't sure I belonged. She had this calm confidence, the kind that made people lean in when she spoke, and I, despite everything I had fought to achieve, still carried the old doubts like invisible scars. I watched her from a distance at first, admiring the way she laughed with friends in the courtyard or the way she always seemed to know the right answer in class, never flaunting it but never hiding it either. I told myself I was lucky just to know her name, to exist even vaguely in her orbit. Then one day, out of nowhere, she asked me to get coffee. I remember blinking, stunned, almost convinced I'd misheard her. But she smiled, just a little, just enough to let me know she meant it, and suddenly all those quiet beliefs I had about not being enough didn't matter. We sat in a cafe just off campus, steam curling between us, and something shifted. From that moment on, we were inseparable. She didn't care about the labels or the past. She never once made me feel small. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, the ridiculous quirks of our professors, and slowly she began to feel like home. Not the home I had known, but the one I had always longed for. From the very beginning, her father welcomed me with the kind of warmth that surprised me, like he had made a quiet decision to judge me by my intentions rather than my background. He asked about my studies, my work, what I hoped to do after graduation, and he listened, really listened, without a trace of condescension. But her mother and her older sister, Amanda, made their feelings known in a way that didn't require words, though they used plenty of those too. The first time we met, there was a pause in the conversation just long enough for judgment to settle in the air, and I saw it in the way her mother looked me up and down, her smile thin and cold, her questions sharp and unnecessarily pointed. They didn't hide their disdain. Amanda made comments about people who work their way up, with a smirk that didn't need translating, and her mother asked about my family in that tone, the one that sounded polite but was really an inspection, as if trying to find something she could use to validate the quiet certainty that I wasn't good enough. I came from the bottom, and to them, that meant something unchangeable. It didn't matter how hard I had worked, what I had accomplished, or how deeply Alice and I loved each other. In their eyes, I was always going to be that kid from the wrong side of everything, someone temporarily tolerated but never fully accepted. Alice noticed it too, of course. She tried to bridge the distance, to stand up for me in conversations that I wasn't even invited into, but there was only so much she could say before it turned into another fight behind closed doors. Still, we stayed together. We didn't flinch. And even though their judgment stung, I never let it change the way I looked at her or the way she looked at me, like we were building something real, something worth defending no matter where I came from. There are some words that no matter how much time passes, you never forget, not because they were loud or dramatic but because of how quietly cruel they were, how deliberately they were meant to wound. I remember the day Amanda looked Alice straight in the eye and said without hesitation, "People who come from nothing are worthless." She didn't whisper it, didn't flinch or backpedal, she said it like it was a fact, like it was something she believed down to her core. I wasn't even in the room when it happened, but Alice told me that night, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief, and I could see how much it hurt her, not just because of what was said but because it came from her own sister. That sentence, those few words, stayed with me like a scar, silent, invisible but impossible to ignore. Even now, after all these years, I can still feel the sting of it. But what amazes me more than anything is that it didn't break us. In fact, it made us stronger. We got married not long after college, in a small ceremony surrounded by the people who actually supported us. Her father smiling with real pride, my parents standing a little taller than usual, finally able to celebrate something without worry clouding their faces. And somehow, despite everything that had been said, despite the resistance and the doubt and the unspoken line her family had drawn in the sand, we've made it through together. 8 years of marriage filled with laughter, fights, quiet mornings, hard-earned milestones, and the kind of love that doesn't need to prove itself anymore. Amanda's words still echo in my memory sometimes, but they've never been louder than the life we've built in spite of them. Now, years later, I look around at the life we've created and still find myself stunned by how far we've come. I've built a career from the ground up, earned every promotion with long nights, relentless determination, and the quiet fire that's burned in me since the day I promised myself I wouldn't stay stuck in the life I was born into. We bought a house. Not just a place to sleep but a home with a backyard big enough to breathe in, a kitchen that smells like comfort, and a pool that sometimes feels like the most ridiculous symbol of how wildly different my reality is from what I once imagined possible. We travel when we can, not because we're chasing escape, but because we can finally move through the world with ease, choosing where we want to be instead of where we can afford to land. And through it all, Alice has been right there beside me, the same woman who asked me to coffee when I thought I wasn't worth her time, who stood beside me when the weight of judgment could have crushed us, who has loved me with the kind of steadiness I didn't even know I needed until I had it. Every bit of this life, every step away from the version of me that grew up counting change and skipping meals, has been built with her by my side. It's a life I once thought belonged to other people, people born into warmth and safety and expectation. But it's ours now. And the most surreal part is how real it feels, how ordinary and sacred it is at the same time, waking up next to the woman I love in a world we built from almost nothing. Amanda always lived like she was born on a throne she didn't need to earn, draped in designer clothes, manicured fingertips wrapped around expensive cocktails, and an attitude that made it clear she saw the rest of us as background noise in a life that sparkled on its own. She married a man who had more money than anyone should reasonably know what to do with, a man whose name alone opened doors in rooms most people never even knew existed. Their wedding was the kind people whispered about for months. A sprawling estate, chandeliers hanging from trees, custom everything, and a guest list curated like a red carpet event. It was the kind of wedding where the price tag wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew it ran well into the hundreds of thousands. After that, she disappeared, her life folding into a world of elite brunches, international getaways and country club banter. We didn't see much of her, and she made it clear we shouldn't expect to. She never outright said we weren't good enough for her, but it was implied in every ignored message, every declined invitation, every moment she reminded Alice with a half-smile that not everyone is cut out for certain circles. We became a distant memory, a footnote in the polished biography she was writing for herself. To her, we weren't on the same level and she liked it that way. Until this year. Until everything came crashing down. It happened almost overnight, at least from the outside looking in. One day Amanda was posting photos of champagne brunches and rooftop dinners, and the next, the silence was deafening. Word trickled down through a mutual acquaintance that her husband had been cheating on her for months, maybe years, and when she confronted him, he didn't beg or apologize. He simply kicked her out of the house, out of the lifestyle, out of the illusion of security she had built her entire identity around. Just like that, the bubble burst. The mansion was no longer hers, the luxury SUV she drove was gone, the cards were cut off, and whatever name she'd once carried like a shield no longer meant anything. She was left with nothing, no money, no car, no title to hide behind. And then, in a twist I can only describe as surreal, she reached out. After years of silence, after treating us like a family she had long since outgrown, Amanda suddenly decided it was time to resume the relationship. That's how she phrased it, like we were a paused program she could just press play on now that her perfect world had fallen apart. No apology, no real acknowledgement of how deeply she had hurt Alice or how cruelly she had dismissed me, just a sudden eagerness to be back in our lives as if nothing had ever happened. It was strange, almost theatrical, the way she tried to step back into the picture, no longer wrapped in designer fabrics, her tone softer, but her motives still wrapped in something we couldn't quite trust. And part of me wondered if this was karma, finally arriving without a knock, stripping away the gloss until all that was left was the version of Amanda we were never meant to see. We had been planning our wedding anniversary celebration for months, wanting it to be something truly special. A reflection of how far we'd come, not just in our marriage but in our lives. It wasn't just a party, it was a quiet triumph, a way of saying, we made it, after all the years of struggle, judgment, and growth. We rented out a beautiful venue, invited the people who had stood by us, and filled the evening with music, good food, and the kind of joy that doesn't need to be flaunted because it's rooted in something real. The guest list was intentional, people who mattered, people who cared. And out of a mixture of obligation and curiosity, we included Amanda and her now former mother-in-law. Almost immediately after they received the invitation, the complaints began. Amanda sent word through someone else, she couldn't even say it to us directly, that the party was inappropriate, that we were being insensitive to her recent divorce, that it was tone-deaf to celebrate love so publicly when hers had just fallen apart. Her former mother-in-law echoed the sentiment, accusing us of lacking compassion, as if our happiness was some kind of personal attack. It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so exhausting. After all the years Amanda spent parading her wealth and superiority, after the way she vanished when our presence no longer served her narrative, it was almost unbelievable to hear her try to paint herself as the victim now. But what struck me most wasn't the hypocrisy, it was the entitlement. The idea that we were supposed to dim our joy to accommodate her loss, that our story should pause because hers had unraveled. It wasn't grief speaking, it was pride bruised and still bleeding. And for the first time we didn't bend. We didn't shrink to make her comfortable. We had earned this celebration, every bit of it, and we weren't going to apologize for that. That night was supposed to be perfect, and for a while it truly was. My wife stepped into the venue wearing the dress I had secretly bought months in advance, the one she had once pointed out in a storefront window with that soft, almost shy smile, not knowing I had taken note of every detail, the way the fabric shimmered subtly under the light, the way it hugged her shoulders just right, the way she whispered that it looked like something out of a dream. I had hidden it away until the week before the party, had it carefully tailored, and seeing her walk toward me that night with that same awestruck expression on her face felt like watching the happiest pages of our story come to life. Everything was unfolding exactly as we'd hoped. The music was warm and familiar, friends clinked glasses around us, laughter moved like a breeze through the room, and for the first time in a long time, the weight of everything we had endured felt far away, like a shadow we had finally outrun. But then Amanda arrived. She had shown up after all, dressed in something too bold for the occasion and wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. For a while, she stayed on the sidelines, sipping wine and talking in hushed tones to anyone who would listen. But then, as we stood by the cake table, taking pictures and greeting guests, she made her way over with a full glass of red wine in hand. What happened next was so fast and so oddly precise that it felt almost rehearsed. She leaned in, said something about how beautiful everything was, and then, just like that, her hand jerked and the entire glass of deep red wine splashed across my wife's dress, staining the bodice and soaking down the side like blood across silk. The room fell silent in an instant, a dozen eyes turning to watch, some gasping, others frozen. Amanda brought her hand to her mouth, muttering, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," but the apology was flat, empty, automatic. I looked at her and saw no real panic, no shame, only a flicker of something colder, quieter, and far more calculated. My wife stood there stunned, her hands barely lifting from her sides, the moment she had been dreaming of swallowed by a spreading crimson stain. And in that instant it was clear, this wasn't an accident. This was Amanda's final attempt to remind us that no matter how far we'd come, she was still capable of pulling us back into her drama, her bitterness, her need to control the narrative. But what she didn't understand, what she never could, is that she hadn't ruined anything. She had only revealed, once again, who she truly was. And we were done pretending otherwise. After the initial silence that followed the spill, it was as if time hesitated, waiting for Amanda to do the decent thing, to look my wife in the eyes, to acknowledge the damage she had done, to offer even the smallest gesture of regret. But instead she shrugged. She didn't apologize. She didn't flinch. With the same smug composure that had followed her through every conflict she'd ever created, she turned to my wife and said, "You're exaggerating. It's just a dress." The words landed like a slap, sharp and dismissive, loud enough for several nearby guests to stop mid-conversation and turn toward us with wide, uncomfortable expressions. My wife stood there, still stunned, holding the fabric of her gown between her fingers, staring down at the ruined stain that spread across what had once been her dream. I saw the color drain from her face, not just from the shock, but from the humiliation of being reduced, in front of everyone we cared about, to someone who was expected to laugh off a deliberate act of spite. Then Amanda added, with a scoff that made my stomach tighten, "You can just buy another one, can't you? I mean, you've got the money now." That was it. That was the moment the last thread of tolerance snapped. I turned to her, calm but cold, and said clearly enough for everyone around to hear, "No, Amanda. You should pay for the dress you ruined." She opened her mouth, probably to deflect or twist the moment into some sort of joke, but I didn't let her. "It wasn't just a dress," I continued. "It was something she dreamed about. It was a gift and it meant something. And whether you meant to or not, you destroyed it. So yes, you should pay for it." A hush fell again, but this time it was filled with the tension of people waiting to see what she'd do, if she would fight back, storm out, try to play the victim. But all she did was laugh, short, bitter, ugly, and walk away without another word, leaving behind the stench of her bitterness and the stain of her pettiness on what was meant to be a celebration of love. But even then, with her retreating, I held my wife's hand and made her a quiet promise that no one else could hear. Amanda would not get to rewrite this night. Not now. Not ever. When Amanda refused to take responsibility for what she had done, even after being given every opportunity to make things right quietly and respectfully, we realized that reason wasn't something she responded to, and compassion had always been a one-way street with her. She mocked the idea of paying for the dress, claimed we were just trying to make a scene, and made it clear that the only language she understood was one spoken in legal terms. So we took her to court, not because we wanted the drama but because we refused to let her get away with hurting the people I love, then smirking her way out of accountability like she always had. From the moment the hearing began, it was obvious where the truth stood. We had security footage from the venue showing the moment the wine glass tipped, and witnesses, guests who had been standing just feet away, gave statements that left no doubt about what had happened and how little remorse Amanda had shown afterward. Her attempt to paint it as a harmless accident quickly unraveled under the weight of reality. Her arrogance, the same shield she had always used to protect herself from consequence, cracked right there in the courtroom. When the judge finally read the decision, it was short and clear. Amanda would reimburse the full cost of the custom dress, along with the cleaning expenses and court fees. She didn't speak, but her face twisted in that familiar expression, a mixture of disbelief and rage, as if she couldn't comprehend that, for once in her life, her status and last name hadn't been enough to bend the truth in her favor. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about what was right, about standing up when someone crosses a line they've crossed one too many times. And walking out of that courtroom hand in hand with my wife, knowing that Amanda's cruelty had finally met a wall it couldn't bulldoze, felt like something we hadn't felt around her in years: justice. After the court ruling, after the dust finally settled and the whispers died down, we sat together on the back porch one evening with the sun low and soft behind the trees and made the quiet but final decision that we should have made long ago. We would cut Amanda and her former mother-in-law out of our lives completely. There were no more second chances to give, no more space in our hearts for people who treated our kindness as weakness and our boundaries as optional. The incident with the dress was just the final straw, the most visible, undeniable proof of what had been true all along, that they had never been interested in being part of our lives in any real or healthy way. What they brought wasn't love or connection. It was disruption, bitterness, and a hunger to control, to belittle, to tear down anything they couldn't understand or dominate. And we were done letting that kind of energy near the life we had built so carefully, so painfully, from nothing. So we stopped answering texts, we stopped accepting invitations, and we stopped pretending that family ties require unconditional tolerance. We didn't make an announcement, didn't throw accusations back their way. We just quietly, firmly shut the door. And in doing so, we gave ourselves something that had long been missing: peace. The kind of peace that settles in your chest like still water after a storm, that lets you sleep through the night without replaying conversations or swallowing anger just to keep the peace for someone else's comfort. We chose happiness. We chose each other. And in choosing that, we finally let go of the people who never truly chose us. A few months passed without a word, and for the first time in years, our home felt untouched by chaos. Then one afternoon, with no warning, no call, not even a message, Amanda showed up on our doorstep like a ghost from a chapter we thought we had closed for good. I opened the door to find her standing there, her expression somewhere between desperation and defiance, like she wasn't sure which mask to wear. She didn't even try for pleasantries, didn't ask how we were, didn't acknowledge everything that had come before. She just asked to see Alice, her voice flat, as if their relationship hadn't been bruised by years of coldness and one very public humiliation. Alice came to the door slowly, hesitant, her arms folded not from fear but from exhaustion, the kind of weariness that comes when you've been burned too many times to still feel surprised. Amanda barely gave her a moment to speak before launching into her reason for coming. She said she was starting a business, something vague and ambitious, probably half-formed, and then she did something so astonishing it left both of us frozen in place. She asked for $20,000. Just like that. No build-up, no humility, no explanation beyond a half-hearted line about investing in her future. She said it like it was something she was owed, like the court, the ruined dress, the years of manipulation, the final cutoff hadn't happened at all. It wasn't a request. It was a demand cloaked in entitlement, the same kind of audacity that had always followed her, as if the world would somehow rearrange itself to suit her needs simply because she wanted it to. And in that moment, it became clearer than ever that Amanda hadn't changed. She had just gotten more desperate. We said no. Not because we wanted to punish her or carry on some grudge, but because the person standing in front of us wasn't asking for help. She was demanding access, yet again, to something she hadn't earned and never respected. Her apology, if it could even be called that, was laced with conditions, tangled in self-pity and entitlement, and every word of it felt rehearsed, designed not to heal but to manipulate. She didn't want forgiveness, she wanted funding. She wanted a shortcut, a safety net, a quick fix from the very people she had humiliated and discarded, and this time, we weren't going to pretend we couldn't see through it. I looked her in the eye and told her the truth, not to be cruel, but because she needed to hear it, probably for the first time in her life. I told her we were not an ATM, not a backup plan, not a resource to be tapped when things got hard. I told her that we had built our lives from the ground up, through hard work and honesty, and if she wanted something for herself, she needed to learn how to make it without stepping on the people around her. Her face twisted with the same familiar rage, that spoiled fury that rose whenever she didn't get what she wanted. And then, right there on our front step, she exploded. She cursed at us, vile, ugly things that no one should ever say to a sibling, let alone someone they once claimed to care about. We stood there, unmoved, letting her tantrum pass through the air like smoke. And when she finally turned and stormed away, I walked straight inside and ordered a set of high-resolution security cameras. Not out of fear but because we were done. Truly finally done. Our home is no longer open to her, not now, not ever. That door is closed and this time it won't be opened again. We chose peace. We chose dignity. And we chose to never again allow her to set fire to the life we worked so hard to build.